Many opponents of Donald Trump and critics of the conflict have repeatedly argued that there is no clear strategy behind actions involving Iran. But the real question being raised is whether what the US president is doing is actually connected to a much larger strategy. On GB News, host Alex Armstrong presented the argument that the conflict is not random at all, but rather part of a far-reaching effort by the United States to reshape the structure of global power. Again and again, mainstream outlets and left-leaning commentators have insisted that there is no roadmap guiding US actions in Iran. The message has been repeated so frequently that many people now accept it as fact. However, another perspective suggests the opposite, that there is indeed a carefully constructed plan, and that signs are emerging which indicate events are unfolding exactly as intended by American leadership.
To understand this viewpoint, supporters of this theory point back to January of this year, when Donald Trump made a dramatic and unexpected move involving Venezuela. In a matter of minutes, the leadership of Nicolas Maduro was reportedly removed. This development is considered crucial to the broader theory. The reasoning given is straightforward. Venezuela holds some of the largest oil reserves in the world, possibly the largest, and one of the most significant buyers of its oil has long been China. The focus then shifts forward to the closing days of last month. During that period, a senior U.S. defense official, identified here as Pete Hegseth, appeared alongside Donald Trump to introduce what they described as a new long-term geopolitical vision. This initiative was labeled the Greater North America Concept. According to the description, this strategic zone would stretch geographically from Venezuela in the south through the United States and into Canada, ultimately extending toward Greenland. Supporters of the idea claim this marks a shift away from global cooperation frameworks toward a model focused on national strength and self-reliance. Under this interpretation, the emerging strategy involves dismantling the existing globalist structure and replacing it with a more nationalist-centered system. Within this framework, Iran becomes a key piece of the puzzle. The logic presented is that a self-reliant superpower must have firm control over its resources while also reshaping global supply routes that already exist. Much of the oil exported from the Middle East moves through the Strait of Hormuz, making that route one of the most critical energy choke points in the world. As the conflict involving Iran intensified, reports described U.S. and Israeli strikes taking place, with energy flow through the Strait of Hormuz becoming increasingly uncertain. Then, according to this narrative, an event occurred that supporters view as evidence of planning rather than coincidence. Donald Trump announced that numerous oil tankers were changing course. These vessels, he explained, were arriving empty and departing fully loaded, demonstrating the capacity of American infrastructure to handle massive energy shipments. He further stated that hundreds of tankers were redirecting away from Middle Eastern routes and heading toward U.S. ports. According to this interpretation, this shift marked one of the largest oil movements in American history. Observers following this theory argue that the United States is positioning itself to become the leading global supplier of oil. For years, Donald Trump has relied heavily on tariffs as a tool of economic leverage, and supporters believe that this strategy is now approaching a decisive moment. Under the broader Greater North America vision, the expectation is that global markets will increasingly depend on American energy exports. With instability affecting traditional oil routes in the Middle East, reliable supplies from that region are seen as less certain, shifting influence back toward the United States. Another significant element of this theory involves Greenland. Within the Greater North America framework, acquiring control or influence over Greenland is viewed as strategically essential. Advocates suggest that an escalating energy shortage could hit both the United Kingdom and countries across Europe, weakening their ability to resist U.S. ambitions regarding Greenland. In this scenario, nations facing energy shortages might be forced to negotiate with Washington, potentially trading political concessions in exchange for stable oil supplies. A second phase of the proposed strategy centers on diplomatic engagement with China. According to the narrative, Donald Trump is scheduled to travel to China for a state visit that had been arranged months earlier. Supporters argue that the timing is no coincidence and that the United States will approach negotiations with a powerful advantage. The idea is that China relies heavily on oil shipments that pass through the Strait of Hormuz, estimated here at roughly 45% of its total supply. Disruptions in that route, supporters claim, could severely weaken China's industrial output and export performance. Reports cited within this perspective suggest that Chinese export growth has dropped to about 2.5% since hostilities involving Iran began. According to this viewpoint, the unfolding situation represents a coordinated effort by the Trump administration to restructure global power dynamics. The objective, supporters argue, is to shift the world away from a globalist model toward a nationalist one, anchored by a self-sufficient American stronghold. In this vision, the United States would emerge as an immense, resource-rich military and economic force dominating the Northern Hemisphere. Advocates of this theory also argue that critics who strongly oppose Trump remain focused on political disagreements rather than the broader strategic picture. They believe the events taking place now were intended from the start and that current developments align closely with the long-term objectives envisioned by the administration.